A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. You know, Herman, I was looking at some satellite imagery from earlier this year, and it is chilling. If you zoom in on the Fordo enrichment site in Iran, right there, nestled into the mountain fortifications, you can see the distinct chassis of S-400 PMU-2 components. These aren't just old relics. They are high-end Russian air defense systems sitting on top of the very site Israel has spent years preparing to neutralize. It really hits home that the map of the Middle East is being redrawn by Russian hardware.
It is a massive shift, Corn. And it is not just the S-300s. We're seeing a total overhaul of the Iranian Integrated Air Defense Network. It is great to be back, by the way. I am Herman Poppleberry, and today we're diving into a topic that feels like a high-stakes chess match, where some of the players are moving pieces under the table. Think about the geography of Fordow for a second. It's buried under a mountain of solid rock. You can't just drop a standard bunker buster on it. You need precision, you need repeated hits on the same entry point, and you need to loiter. But if you have S-300s parked on the ridges above, that loitering becomes a suicide mission.
Well, Daniel certainly thinks so. He sent us a prompt that gets right to the heart of this. Let me read what he wrote. Let's discuss the Iranian-Russian connection and how Russia has been integral in providing Iran with air defense and radar systems. Is this support ongoing? And how can it be that Israel maintains normal diplomatic relations with Russia, while Russia is literally arming the country seeking its destruction?
Daniel is hitting on the ultimate strategic paradox of 2026. We are looking at a relationship that has moved far beyond transactional into something much more like a functional military alliance. And by the way, for the tech nerds listening, today's episode is actually being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. It's writing our script today, which is fitting given how much AI and automation are now baked into these modern radar systems we're about to discuss.
It's a bit meta, isn't it? An AI helping us describe how Russian AI-driven radars are tracking Israeli jets. But Daniel's question about ongoing support is the kicker. Because I think a lot of people assume Russia is too busy in Ukraine to help Iran, but the data suggests the exact opposite. People think Russia is running out of chips and tubes, but they are actually prioritizing these exports because Iran is their primary source of Shahed drones. It's a direct barter system.
Well, not exactly in the sense of agreeing blindly, but the data shows a massive acceleration. Since the 12-day war back in June of 2025, the flow of equipment across the Caspian Sea has become a torrent. We aren't just talking about a few spare parts. We're talking about Su-35 fighter jets, S-400 components, and perhaps most importantly, the eyes of the system, the Nebo-M radar.
Let's start there, with the hardware, because if you're an Israeli pilot sitting in an F-35, the Nebo-M is the thing keeping you up at night. Most people hear air defense, and they think of the missiles, the big tubes that go boom. But the missiles are useless if you can't see the target. What makes the Russian radar support so different now than it was, say, 5 years ago?
It's the multi-band integration. The Nebo-M is what's called a RLMD system, a programmable multi-band radar. It uses 3 different radar modules operating in different frequencies: VHF, L-band, and S-band. Now, why does that matter for an F-35? Because stealth aircraft are generally optimized to be invisible to high-frequency radars, like X-band, which are used for fire control. But they are much more visible to low-frequency VHF radars. In the past, VHF radars were too clunky and imprecise to actually guide a missile. You'd know a plane was somewhere over there, but you couldn't hit it. Think of it like trying to find a needle in a haystack with a flashlight that only shows you the general area of the hay.
So the Nebo-M bridges that gap? It uses the low frequency to find the ghost, and then hands that data off to the higher frequencies to get a lock.
That is the goal. The Nebo-M uses sophisticated digital signal processing to fuse those three bands into a single tracking picture. When Russia delivered these systems to Iran in 2024 and 2025, they essentially gave Iran a stealth detecting net. It doesn't make the F-35 obsolete, but it shrinks the bubble of invincibility that Israeli pilots used to rely on. And according to reports from just last month, March of 2026, Russia is now providing real-time satellite intelligence and targeting data to complement those ground-based radars.
But wait, Herman, how does that actually work on a tactical level? If I'm an Iranian commander sitting in a bunker, am I seeing a Russian satellite feed on one screen and my Nebo-M on the other? Or is it more integrated than that?
It's becoming much more integrated. We're talking about data link sharing. Russia has been perfecting this in Ukraine, where they link their A-50U early warning planes with ground-based S-400 batteries. They are exporting that network-centric philosophy to Tehran. So, the Iranian commander isn't just looking at two screens, he's looking at a fused, common operational picture. If a Russian satellite detects a heat signature from an F-35 engine ignition at an Israeli airbase like Nevatim, that data is pushed to Iran before the jet even clears the runway.
That is a huge escalation. If Russia is feeding Iran live satellite feeds, they aren't just selling a product, they are acting as a battle manager. It reminds me of how the US provides intel to Ukraine, but in reverse. Russia is using its space assets to help Iran track US and Israeli movements in the Persian Gulf. There was that drone strike near the US Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain recently. The word is that Russian targeting data made that possible.
It's highly likely. And we have to look at the Caspian Sea route Daniel mentioned. This is the internal lake strategy. Russia and Iran have spent the last 2 years turning the Caspian into a private highway. Because it's landlocked and controlled by 5 littoral states, none of which are Western aligned. The US Navy can't get in there to intercept shipments. We've seen specialized ro-ro ships, roll-on roll-off vessels, moving between the port of Astrakhan in Russia and Anzali in Iran. They are moving S-400 batteries in broad daylight because they know nobody can stop them.
I've heard people call the Caspian the black hole of intelligence. Is it really that hard to track? I mean, we have satellites. Can't we see what's on the decks of those ships?
We can see the ships, but we can't see inside the containers. And more importantly, there is no legal framework for a visit, board, search, and seizure operation in the Caspian. If the U.S. stops a ship in the Arabian Sea, they can cite international sanctions. In the Caspian, it's Russian and Iranian sovereign waters. It's basically a conveyor belt with a do not disturb sign on it. We've seen imagery of crates that are the exact dimensions of S-400 launch tubes being moved onto trucks at the port of Bandar Anzali. By the time the image is analyzed, those trucks are already deep in the Iranian interior, headed for Isfahan or Bushehr.
It's funny you mentioned broad daylight, because even when they try to hide it, the OSINT community, the open source intelligence guys, are catching them. If you follow the ship trackers, you see these massive gaps in AIS transponder data. A ship leaves Russia, goes dark, for 3 days, and then shows up in Iran sitting much higher in the water, because it just offloaded 50 tons of radar equipment.
And it's not just heavy metal. We're seeing a shift toward point defense systems too. Just in February of 2026, there was a deal for advanced Russian shoulder-fired missiles, MANPA, DS, specifically designed to target low-flying drones and helicopters. Russia is helping Iran build a layered defense. You have the S-400s for the high-altitude stuff, the S-300s for the mid-range, and then these new systems for the close-in fight. It's a Russian-style A2AD bubble, anti-access area denial.
Let's talk about that bubble for a second. If Iran successfully implements a full Russian-style A2AD zone, does that mean Israel's qualitative military edge is gone? Or is this just making the price of admission higher?
It's the latter, but the price might become too high to pay. Historically, Israel's strategy has been mowing the grass, surgical strikes with 0 casualties on their side. A Russian-backed Iranian defense changes the math. Instead of sending 2 jets to take out a lab, you might have to send 60 jets, a dozen electronic warfare planes, and a massive cruise missile barrage just to suppress the radars long enough for the strike package to get through. You're moving from a surgical strike model to a major theater war model. That's a huge deterrent.
Okay, so the technical side is clear. Russia is arming Iran to the teeth with the best sensors and shooters they have. But that brings us to the second half of Daniel's prompt, which is the part that makes my head spin. How on earth is Israel still talking to Moscow? If I'm Benjamin Netanyahu, and I see Putin handing the keys to my destruction to the Ayatollah, why am I not cutting ties tomorrow?
It sounds insane on the surface, doesn't it? But this is where geopolitical chess becomes really dark. The reason Israel maintains normal relations is actually because of Syria. Since 2015, Russia has been the primary power broker in Syrian airspace. They have the Haimaim Air Base and the Tartus naval facility. If Israel wants to strike Hezbollah weapon shipments or IRGC bases in Syria, which they do almost weekly, they have to fly through Russian skies.
Right, the deconfliction mechanism. It's basically a hotline between Tel Aviv and the Russian command in Syria. Israel calls up and says, "Hey, we're coming through at 30,000 feet, don't shoot us down." And the Russians look the other way.
Well, they essentially agree to stay neutral in exchange for Israel not hitting Russian assets. If Israel were to break ties with Putin over the Iran deals, Russia could flip a switch and activate the S-400s they have stationed in Syria. Suddenly, every Israeli mission into Syria becomes a potential dogfight with Russian batteries. Israel is essentially being held hostage by Russia's presence on its northern border.
But isn't there a breaking point here? I mean, if Russia is helping Iran build a nuclear-capable defense, does the Syrian hotline really matter anymore? It feels like Israel is trading a tactical advantage in Syria for a strategic catastrophe in Iran.
That's the debate raging inside the Israeli cabinet right now. There's a faction that says, we need to stop playing nice with Moscow, and another that says, if we lose Syria, we have Hezbollah on our doorstep with high-end Russian missiles. It's a choice between a heart attack and slow-acting poison. And don't forget, Russia also plays a role in restraining Iran in Syria, or at least they pretend to. They tell Israel, if you keep talking to us, we'll make sure the Iranians don't put their most advanced drones right on your border. It's a classic protection racket.
Nice Air Force you got there. Shame if something happened to it while you were trying to stop Hezbollah. But surely there's a limit. I mean, we're talking about 48 Su-35 fighter jets being delivered to Iran through 2027. That's a $6.5 billion deal. At what point does the threat from Iran outweigh the convenience of the Syrian hotline?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. And the 12-day war in 2025 really tested that. During that conflict, we saw Russia trying to play both sides. They provided some intel to Iran, but they didn't actively intervene to stop Israeli strikes. It's a controlled chaos strategy. Russia wants Iran strong enough to distract the US, and Israel, but not so strong that they start a regional war that destroys Russia's own bases in Syria.
It's a Goldilocks level of violence. Not too hot, not too cold, but man, it's a dangerous game. I was reading the report from Intelligence Online just a few weeks ago that suggested the deconfliction deal is tipping in Moscow's favor. Basically, Putin is starting to demand more from Israel in exchange for that blind eye in Syria. He might be asking Israel to tone down its support for Ukraine, or to stay quiet about Iranian cooperation in the Caspian.
And that's the gray zone Daniel is asking about. Normal. Diplomatic relations in this context don't mean they are friends. It means they are two professionals in a room who both have guns pointed at each other under the table. They smile, they shake hands, and they discuss agricultural trade. But the entire time, they are calculating how much they can get away with. It's a very cold, very calculated form of diplomacy. It's not about trust, it's about the management of mutual threats.
It's also about the Russian diaspora in Israel, isn't it? More than 1 million Israelis are Russian speakers. Many have family back there. You can't just go full Cold War with Moscow without causing a massive domestic political rift in Israel.
That is a huge factor that people in the West often miss. It makes a total break culturally and politically very difficult. If Netanyahu were to declare Russia an enemy state, he'd be alienating a massive chunk of his own electorate. Many of these people still watch Russian state media. They have deep ties to the motherland. It's a domestic stabilizer that Putin uses as leverage.
Let's pivot back to the tech for a moment. One thing I keep seeing in the reports is electronic warfare, or EW. We know Russia is the world leader in jamming GPS and disrupting drone signals. Are they giving that to Iran too?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that might be more dangerous than the missiles. There is a system called the Krasuka-4. It's a mobile electronic warfare complex that can jam AWACS planes and even low Earth orbit satellites. There are persistent rumors that Russian contractors are operating Krasuka units near the Natanz nuclear site. If an Israeli jet flies into that zone, its GPS navigation could fail, its radar could be blinded by noise, and its communication with base could be cut. You're essentially flying blind into a wall of missiles.
It's the Alabuga model we've talked about in other contexts. This idea of deep technical integration. Russia isn't just selling a box, they're sending engineers to help Iran integrate these Russian sensors with Iranian-made missiles. It's a hybrid architecture. You might have a Russian Nebo-M radar talking to an Iranian Bavar 373 missile system. That is a nightmare for mission planners because you can't just study one country's playbook anymore.
It's a tripartite defense now too. Don't forget China. While Russia provides the high-end sensors and the jets, China is providing the mass-produced components for the missiles, like the CM-302. So Iran is building this Frankenstein's monster of an air defense network that combines Russian brains, Chinese parts, and Iranian persistence. This means that even if you find a vulnerability in a Russian radar, the Iranian missile it's talking to might have a completely different electronic signature than what you're prepared for.
And Israel is caught in the middle. I saw a case study from late 2025 where Israeli jets actually had to abort a strike on an Iranian facility because a Russian early warning radar detected them much further out than expected. The element of surprise is evaporating. If you can't surprise them, you have to use overwhelming force, which means a much bigger, much bloodier war.
Which is exactly what Russia wants the U.S. to worry about. Every time the U.S. has to send another carrier group to the Persian Gulf or move more Patriot batteries to Israel, that is equipment and attention being diverted away from Ukraine. For Putin, the Iran-Israel conflict is the ultimate gift. It's a second front that he doesn't even have to fight himself, he just has to provide the tools to keep it simmering. He's essentially using Iran as a giant sovereign distraction for the entire Western alliance.
So, looking forward into the rest of 2026, what should we be watching for? If you're a defense analyst, where are your eyes?
First, watch the S-400 deliveries. If Russia starts delivering the full-up S-400 batteries to Tehran, not just components, that is a massive red line for Israel. The S-400 has a range of 400 kilometers. If parked on the Iranian coast, it can see planes taking off from bases in the Gulf states. Second, watch the Caspian Sea. In late 2025, Israel reportedly hit a shipment in the Caspian. That was a huge escalation. If Israel starts regularly striking targets in what Russia considers its private lake, all bets are off.
That would be wild. Striking a ship in the Caspian is basically poking the Russian bear in its own backyard. But if that's where the Su-35s are coming from, Israel might feel like they have no choice. It's like trying to stop a leak by plugging the pipe, but the pipe is in the neighbor's house.
And the neighbor is a nuclear-armed state with a very short temper. The paradox Daniel pointed out, the normal relations, is the only thing keeping that from becoming a direct Russia-Israel war. As long as they are still talking, there's a chance to manage the escalation, but the width of that diplomatic tightrope is getting narrower every day. Think about the risk of a miscalculation. A Russian technician is working on a radar in Iran, an Israeli missile hits it, and suddenly Putin has a martyr to use as a pretext for closing the skies over Syria.
It's also worth noting how this affects the Abraham Accords countries. If you're the UAE or Saudi Arabia, and you see Russia, who you also have relations with, arming Iran to the teeth, it makes you wonder about the value of Russian friendship. Russia is playing a very dangerous game of being everyone's partner while fueling the fires that burn them.
Russia doesn't want partners, Korn. They want dependence. They want a world where everyone has to come to Moscow to ask for permission or for protection. By arming Iran, they make themselves the only people who can restrain Iran. It's the classic arsonist as the fireman strategy. They sell the gasoline to Tehran and the fire extinguisher to Riyadh, and then they sit back and collect the influence.
I'll give your enemy a flamethrower, but don't worry, I'm the only one who can sell you a fire extinguisher. It's brilliant in a purely Machiavellian way, but man, it's a recipe for a regional explosion. Does Russia actually have the capacity to keep this up, though? I mean, their own losses in Ukraine are staggering. Can they really afford to send 48 high-end fighter jets abroad?
It's a matter of strategic necessity. They need those Iranian drones and ballistic missiles more than they need the jets right now. In the Donbass, a Su-35 is just another target for a Patriot battery. But in Iran, those 48 jets can tie down the entire U.S. Central Command. It's a force multiplier for Russia's global position. They are trading airframes for geopolitical leverage.
Well, before we get too deep into the software side, let's take a step back and look at the takeaways for our listeners. Because this stuff can feel very abstract until you realize it's what's deciding the price of oil and the risk of a global conflict.
Right. If you're a defense analyst or just someone who likes to follow open source intelligence, the first takeaway is follow the Nebo-M. These radar deployments are the leading indicator of where Iran expects a fight. Satellite imagery of the Fordow site or the Natanz facility. If you see those 3-module radar arrays popping up, you know Russia has just upgraded that site's vision. It's the most reliable way to track the hardening of the Iranian nuclear program.
And for the policy-minded folks, the second takeaway is that the Russia-Iran alliance is no longer a marriage of convenience. It's a structural feature of the 2020s. The idea that we can flip Russia or convince them to stop arming Iran is a fantasy. They're too deep into the Alabuga model of cooperation now. The military-industrial complexes of the two countries are becoming intertwined. They are sharing blueprints, sharing code, and sharing personnel.
And the third takeaway is for the citizen detectives. If you want to see this happening in real time, monitor the shipping traffic in the Caspian Sea. Use sites like Marine Traffic or follow the OSCENT accounts that track Russian ro-ro ships. Look for those dark periods where ships disappear near the Iranian coast. That is the heartbeat of this alliance. When those ships go dark, it usually means something significant is being offloaded, something that neither Moscow nor Tehran wants the world to see on a satellite feed.
It's the most important internal lake in the world right now. It's basically a conveyor belt for the axis of resistance.
It really is. And it brings up an open question for the future. What happens when an Israeli pilot using a US-made F-35 is inevitably challenged by a Russian-made Su-35 flown by an Iranian pilot, all while being tracked by a Russian radar? That isn't a hypothetical anymore. With the delivery scheduled through 2027, that is a certainty. We are looking at a direct technological proxy war where the weapons are Russian and American, but the blood is Middle Eastern.
And if that Israeli pilot shoots down the Su-35, does Russia blame Iran, or do they blame Israel? That's where the normal diplomatic relations will face the ultimate stress test. If a Russian technician is killed on the ground in Iran during an Israeli strike, does Putin stay neutral, or does he decide that the Syrian hotline is no longer worth the cost?
That is the tripwire risk. We know there are Russian advisors in Iran helping with the S-400 integration. If Israel strikes a battery and kills Russian personnel, the Syria deconfliction deal could evaporate in an afternoon. That is the leverage Putin holds over Netanyahu. It's a dead man's switch for regional stability.
It's a terrifying thought, but I think it's the reality of the new axis we're living in. Russia, Iran, and China are building an integrated defense architecture that is specifically designed to neutralize Western technological advantages, like stealth and precision guidance. They are learning from each other's wars. Russia is taking lessons from Ukraine and applying them to Iran's air defense.
It's an offset strategy in reverse. The West spent the last 30 years relying on stealth. Russia is spending the next 10 years making stealth obsolete through multiband radar and integrated EW. They aren't trying to outbuild the US. In terms of stealth, they are trying to outsee it. And by giving that vision to Iran, they are making it impossible for the US or Israel to act with impunity in the region.
Well, Herman, I think we've thoroughly unpacked Daniel's prompt. It's a grim picture, but an essential one to understand if you want to know why the Middle East looks the way it does in 2026. It's no longer just about regional rivalries. It's about a global competition for technological dominance played out over the skies of Isfahan and Damascus.
It really is. And it's a reminder that geography still matters. The Caspian Sea, the mountains of Fordau, the skies of Syria. These physical locations are where the cloud-based geopolitical strategies actually meet the ground. You can have all the AI in the world, but if you can't get a radar chassis across the Caspian, your strategy fails. Russia is making sure those chassis get across.
And where the cheeky sloth meets the nerdy donkey, apparently.
I was wondering when you'd bring that up. You've been being very serious analyst today.
Hey, even a sloth can see when the world is on fire, Herman. I just prefer to watch it from a very comfortable branch. But seriously, this Russian-Iranian connection is the defining military story of the decade. It changes everything from naval deployments to nuclear non-proliferation.
It is, and we'll be here to track it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. This was a lot of ground to cover, but I think we really got to the core of why this relationship is so resilient and so dangerous.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for listening. This has been a fascinating one to dig into. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes and making sure we don't wander off into too many tangents.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and our research pipeline. We couldn't do these deep dives into satellite imagery and radar physics without that kind of horsepower. It really makes a difference when you're trying to simulate these detection bubbles.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you're enjoying the show, do us a favor and leave a quick review on your podcast app. It actually helps new people find us, which we appreciate. We're trying to grow the community of weird prompt enthusiasts.
You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the RSS feed and all our social links. We post some of the maps and imagery we discussed there as well.
And if you want to be like Daniel and send us a prompt that makes Herman talk for 30 minutes straight, email us at show@myweirdprompts.com. We love the technical ones, clearly. The more acronyms, the better.
I think I only talked for 28 minutes, but who's counting?
I'm a sloth. I have nothing but time. I've got my stopwatch right here next to my hibiscus tea.
Fair enough. Until next time, keep your eyes on the Caspian.
Stay curious, everyone. Goodbye. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird